Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Prajajanarandana Jasodanandana Prajajanarandana Jamunatira Vanachadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayo Vishnupad Paramahamsa Harivedagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Premanandi. Okay. Are you sitting way over there in the corner? Are you able to see this screen over here? Because if not, you might want to reposition yourself. There's room over on this side. Could you move the mridanga? I'll try again. Can you see the screen? What about Mataji across the way from you? She's behind the chair, what to speak of the screen. There's space if you want. You don't have to, but if there's space over here, you're fine. Because a lot of this is what's going to be the visual part that's on the screen, and if you can't see it, it's not going to be the same experience. Okay. As you see on the screen, Gita value number 5. So some of you haven't heard 1 through 4. So I probably should give you a little background on Gita value, or Gita values, plural, and where it fits in and all of that. One way of describing this topic is, some years ago, there was a group of devotees, very senior persons, including some faculty members from Oxford University who are devotees, and some people that teach Bhagavad Gita in a systematic way, and some other people that were in a position of leadership of the worldwide organization. They got together and discussed a topic of how what makes a good leader, how to be a good leader, how to be a good teacher and a leader, and so forth and so on. And it came around after a day's worth of time together. All of this is taught in Bhagavad Gita. So they came up with the term, Gita values. And then it got refined. It got down to, although there's many, it became 6. And each of the 6, there was a paragraph that largely the faculty member, don't sit right in front of her. This is largely the faculty members from Oxford University refined the language, and they had a little document. And if our host, did you get this document? The 6 Gita values. We'll see that you get it, and then you can forward it to all your friends. Someone will see to that, right? Yes. Okay. So that's a little bit of the background. It's taking, the Oxford University ivory tower version of Bhagavad Gita and bringing it down to everyday people. Gita values, and 6 in number. It's quite simple. And so far we've covered 4. And now we're on number 5. And number 5, just in one word, is icha, or desire or choice. So that's our topic for this evening. And an image that we showed each of the previous 4 times. So for the rest of us in the room, we've seen it 4 times. For some of you are seeing it for the first time. It's a nice image of an iceberg. Sometimes in organization development, they call the culture of an organization, a group of people, a family, even an individual. There's a certain culture. And the culture has different aspects, likened to an iceberg, where there's the part of the iceberg that sticks above the surface of the water, and there's a big part of the iceberg that's not visible, but it's there, below the surface of the water. So what's on top, we're going to make reference to this in the very beginning. As we go along, you'll see. So what's at the top is the visible part. So in the culture of an organization, corporation, family, a nation, a group of people, whatever, there's observable things, behaviors, things that you can detect with your senses, the way of speaking, the way of dressing, the way of behaving, behaviors. And then there's a whole lot beneath that's not visible. And the big part, which is our topic, is values. Supposing a group wants to form an organization, a legal organization, they want to incorporate. So they have to make a statement of purpose. It's just law. So that the persons review your incorporate documents, they can see which category you fit in based upon your stated purposes or your beliefs or what you say is important to you as an organization, as a group, whatever it is. Stated values. And there's an interplay between stated values. Often stated values drive behaviors. Behaviors are determined by the values, but adjustment in behaviors can change values. Good and bad, up and down. So there's an interplay between the two. And then there's the bottom of the iceberg. The bottom of the iceberg represents unchanging realities. They're fixed. Just realities of life, like gravity or, something. So for Bhagavad Gita, we're spirit soul. There are different coverings. There may be values, this group of people, that group of people. They may be behaviors, but there's something that's unchanging amongst all living beings. We're all spirit soul, for example. And the idea is to align those unchanging realities with your values, with your behaviors. If not, you need to go to a chiropractor. You're out of alignment. And it's painful. Go to a chiropractor. Go to a Bhagavad Gita teacher, then they'll help you make that proper alignment. So I decided, not knowing that I'd be with a group of people that hadn't been to the first 4, but it works well. We're going to have a quick review. For those of you that have been with us, there's 3 questions. Quick review. For the benefit of those that haven't taken part so far, slowly raise your hand and list the 4, in sequence, the 4 Gita values that we've covered so far. Who would like to volunteer? Raise your hand. You're going to do the next question. You do the first question. First Gita value, what we spoke about was? It starts with an S. Samadarshana. Samadarshana. Pandita. Samadarshana. It's a verse from Bhagavad Gita. Pandita. Samadarshana. A learned person sees with equal vision. Next, after Samadarshana, everybody knows what ahimsa means. Ahimsa is nonviolence. And it flows from seeing equal. We'll discuss it a little bit. Samadarshana ahimsa. Number 3. Amanitva. Amanitva means humility. So, Samadarshana, ahimsa, amanitva. These are values. Remember that iceberg? It drives behaviors of a culture. So one who has humility, they behave a certain way. In the absence, they behave another way. And so forth. Values drive behaviors. You can try to teach your child or children a behavior, but it doesn't stick unless there's a value that displays that behavior. It's one thing to teach a child to say please and thank you. It's another thing to teach a child gratitude. Right? Good luck, parents. And so that's Samadarshana, ahimsa, amanitva, or humility, and then? Acharya. Acharya. Everyone knows the meaning. You know the meaning? Acharya. One who teaches by example. Acharya. One who teaches by example. So this is review. Now, we have a bright student. If I ask for volunteers, she's going to raise her hand first, so I'll just call on her. I'm going to ask her to explain to everybody in the room succinctly each of the 4 values, what they mean, one at a time. And then when that's done, explain how this value drives behaviors or speech. Ready? Give her the microphone. So we start with Samadarshana. You're going to remember these because we're going to continue on to number 5 shortly. Samadarshana. A succinct explanation of Samadarshana, please.
Hare Krishna. So the first Gita value we learned is Samadarshana. So in Sanskrit, Samadarshana means equal vision. That's what it directly translates to. And the succinct explanation is when we see a person, we're all from different cultures and different races and we look different, we talk different, but and we respect all those differences and we notice all those differences externally, but we know that internally we're all the same. We're all a soul who are inhabiting different bodies. It's almost like a driver who goes into different cars, and that even though we see the cars are different, we know the driver is the same. So when we act on that basis, stuff like wars and groupism and separatism, all those can be halted.
Okay. Samadarshana. Recognizing and respecting and relating to others according to their position, their coverings, the body and the mind, while at the same time recognizing there's a soul within, and respecting the soul within primarily as who the individual is. There's a covering, and that's going to change. And there's an unchanging part. Then,
The next Gita value is ahimsa. It's number 2. And ahimsa, as a lot of you know, it translates to nonviolence. So when we think about nonviolence, I mean, it's natural to think about, not harming somebody else or something else. And a little deeper, this Gita value goes into the fact that nonviolence includes enlightening people about, real knowledge. Because without the real knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita or the scriptures, you suffer, or anybody, they suffer. And protecting a person from suffering is nonviolence. And the opposite, or not enlightening them or not giving them or sharing what you know, is, being like, okay, let them suffer, which is a form of violence. So that's the deeper message of nonviolence.
succinctly expressed. We spent an hour with that one. So samadarshana, ahimsa, then humility.
Yeah. So amanitva is the Sanskrit for humility. So we discussed that sometimes when we hear a lot that we should be humble and we should have humility, but sometimes, it's only in theory. We don't really practice it, especially when we receive some praise or some honor. We get puffed up and we feel like, this is all me and this came from me. And that pride, honestly, they say pride comes before fall. So Bhagavad Gita teaches us that when we should always be humble, knowing that whatever we have is a gift from God and our spiritual teachers who have endowed us with that service and the ability to do the service. And we also discussed that humility doesn't mean that you hate yourself or you think you're low. It's not low self-esteem. It just means that you know where whatever good qualities you have come from. And in that mood of humility, you'll be able to perform your duties and services better.
Succinct. Again, we spent an hour on that one. So there's an interconnection going back to, this comes at the end. Okay, we'll wait till we get to the end. Samadarshana, ahimsa, amanitva, humility, and the fourth is acharya.
So acharya is the fourth principle, the one before this one. And acharya is almost like it's a culmination of the Gita values we learned 1, 2, 3. It's acharya really embodies all the 3 principles. So the samadarshana, ahimsa, and humility. So acharya means teaching by example. So you guys must know achar means example. So when an acharya is somebody who, they behave the way they preach. So they don't say something and do something. So what they say is what they practice. And that purity is what enables them to preach to others effectively. Like our founder Acharya, ISKCON's founder Acharya, for example, he came to US with zero. He didn't have any money or he didn't have any resources, but just his purity, the fact that he walked his talk, just attracted so many, Americans who had no clue about Eastern culture. So that's an acharya. They teach by example and they embody ahimsa and samadarshana and humility.
So going back to the iceberg image, iceberg of culture, because we started, spiritual culture means all of these things. Spiritual culture, another way of saying spiritual culture is self-realization, or a self-realized person acts with spiritual culture. So the values, in short, values strongly influence, if not drive, behaviors and speech. Anyway, so let's just do that. Now the last one, who maybe another person in the room, who would like to explain how all these values are resting on and are to be aligned with the bottom of the iceberg of culture. Someone want to volunteer to explain that one? No? Anyone? Everyone's shy. Well, let's just take, I'll do it then. Just take one thing, two things. There's a spirit soul, and there's a supreme soul. And the eternal, unchanging reality of spirit souls in relation to the supreme soul that are parts of the whole, the source of everything, including all the parts, part and parcel living entities. Therefore, it is natural for the part to serve the whole. That's what parts do. Just like the hand is part of the body, the hand is meant for serving the body. If the hand doesn't serve the body, if it's disconnected from the body, its value is lost. In fact, it's pretty gross. Chopped off hand in the middle of the floor is pretty gross. So connecting us to the Supreme, that's an unchanging reality of the healthy condition. And so therefore, value should be in line with that, who we are, both in fundamental identity and then relationship with the whole, and then values and behaviors should be in alignment with that. And when it's in alignment, then you have a wholesome culture of an individual, of a family, of a group, of a nation, of a whatever. And from Bhagavad Gita, the opposite is true. The Kauravas, they were out of alignment. So they made a mess. And then the mess had to be cleaned up. Okay, so now we're on Gita value number 5, which is Ichcha, or choice. So we're going to start with a question. Do we really have a choice? Well, in one sense, we have a choice. But let's go down a little bit in what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita about do we have a choice. He explains, as you see in the image on the right side, the 3 modes of material nature are conditioning like marionettes. They're conditioning living entities in this world. Everything living entities do in this world is moved by the 3 modes of nature, and behind the 3 modes of nature, there's the Supreme. So material nature, one of the ways of that the Sanskrit term for material nature is Prakriti, and Prakriti is moved by the 3 modes of material nature, and the Ishvara is one of the topics of Bhagavad Gita. Ishvara controls the 3 modes. So in one sense, living entities, those folks at the bottom, they're controlled by the Supreme, who controls the 3 modes of material nature, who controls the living entities. So do we really have a choice? Kind of look like we don't have a choice. Kind of look like that. And not only that, look at this. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 5, Krishna says, the embodied spirit, that's us, master of the city of his body, that's us, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act, nor does he create the fruits of action. Wait a minute. All the time, we're acting, we're inducing others to act, and we create the fruits of action. That's what else is there left? But Krishna says, chapter 5, no. So if no, then what does? All this was enacted by the modes of material nature. Gosh. So everything's conducted by the modes of material nature. We can't create activities even. So where's choice? Let's do it again. The 3 modes of material nature control living entities. They condition living entities. We can't get free from the modes of material nature on our own. And the modes of nature are controlled by the Supreme Lord. So living entities are controlled by the Supreme Lord. And we can't create activity either. Nor we can induce others to act, nor can we create the fruits of our actions. Although all that stuff is going on. We do. We create activities. We do activities. We don't create them. Material nature does. We don't induce people to act. Material nature does. The modes of material nature. We don't create the fruits of our work. We work. But some people work and they don't get much, and some people work and they get a lot. So what's going on? It's the modes of nature. It's Prakriti. So now back to our question. Do we really have a choice? Now, it's a fundamental teaching of Bhagavad Gita that we have a choice. So you see the dilemma, I hope. Here's what Bhagavad Gita has to say about this. Chapter 5, we already looked at a verse from chapter 5. This is chapter 7. Living entities belong to the superior nature. Living entities belong to the superior nature. Let's do this one. I'm especially looking at our newer people because you know you're less familiar with the structure of Bhagavad Gita than some of the rest of us. Let's back up to the chapter 6. What's chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita? It's Dhyan Yoga. Dhyan means meditation. Dhyan Yoga is one part of the Eightfold Yoga system. What's the Eightfold Yoga system? Yama, Niyama, Asana. When people go to yoga class, mainly asanas. But they just say that's yoga. But it's just asanas. It's not, that's one part of the Eightfold Yoga system. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama. You heard it? Breath control, right? Pranayama. That's number 4 out of the 8. Then number 5 is pratyahara. That's withdrawing the senses and consolidating so you can do the meditation better. But before you do the meditation better, you do the first 5. You do the first 4 so you can consolidate the subtle senses internally. Bhishma Dev did this. When it was time for his departure, he did the Pratyahara program. He consolidated his senses, became very quiet. Then the last 3 are stages of meditation. Dhyan, Dharana, Samadhi. Samadhi, complete trance of meditation. So when Krishna describes in chapter 6, Arjuna is asking the question, what should I do? What's my duty? Krishna's answer at the end of chapter 6, it's a summary of the first 6 chapters. He says, by all means, Arjuna, be a yogi. And of all yogas, one is the uttama, the topmost form of yoga. Yogi namapi sarvesham madgaten antaratmana shradhavan bhajate yomam same yukta uttama. Uttama means topmost. It's the topmost yoga. What's that? It's bhakti. And bhakti has 2 parts. What's that? What the mind does and what the body does. In simple terms. Madgaten antaratmana, your mind fixed on me, within, antaratmana, madgaten antaratmana, mind absorbed in me. That's what the mind does in the topmost yoga. And then shradhavan, with faith. Shradhavan, van means possessing. Shradhavan bhajate. Yomam, bhajate is the root word, the dhatu, for bhakti. You engage your senses in objects of the senses in service to the Supreme. That's bhajate, bhajan. Engage in devotional service to Krishna. That's what the body does, and what the mind does is absorbed in Krishna. So then Krishna says, that's the end of chapter 6. He begins chapter 7, which is what we're going to be discussing just now. I'm going to explain how you do it. And to explain how to do it, he gives a little explanation of, over here is categories of matter, And over here is categories of spirit. We belong to the category of spirit. Same as the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita. You're not the body. Just breaking it down. The body has 8 parts. What are those 8 parts? Prakriti, material nature. Bina, separated energy. Bina Prakriti Ashtada, 8 separated energies. What are those 8? Here they are. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, that's 5. Mind, intelligence, false ego, that's 3. 3 plus 5 is 8. So the inferior energy is those 8, and then there's the superior energy, that's para prakriti. Para means transcendental or supreme. There's apara and para. Bina prakritir ashtada. The separated energies are 8, and then aside from those 8, there's the living entity, that's para, or superior nature, or energy. And in the next verse, Krishna says, due to conditioned life, that's conditioned life, by the way. Due to conditioned life, they are, the living entities, are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. The 6 senses are those 5 indicated in the bottom: the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, and touch. That's 5. And then the 6th is the mind. The 6 senses, because all the information from the knowledge-acquiring senses goes to the mind. It's like a switchboard operator. There's a light, and the switchboard operator connects the light with, the switchboard. Yes, hello, can I help you? No, it's done all mechanically, but before that was that system. That's what the mind does. It gathers information and stores the information. Impressions within the mind from the senses are stored. Something you see, something you taste, something you hear, and the impression is stored. The big file, very better than Bill Gates has ever created, is the mind. In fact, the computers are just a representation of, a crude or representation of what the mind does. It receives information and it stores it. And it's plus or minus. Binary processor. That's what the mind is. Plus or minus. I like it, I don't like it. I'm like kind of undecided. So, due to conditioned life, they're struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. So that's the struggle. Now that's the living entity within material nature. Then, being part of the supreme divine grace, the living entity, the soul, has free will and independence. It is eternal and therefore has a choice at every step. So let's do that one again. Even in circumstances that are just thrust upon us because of the 8 separated energies and the mind is gathering information to do with those 8 separated energies, it's going into the mind. Now you have a choice. I mean, the binary one is I like it, I don't like it. But then there's subsets of those I like it, I don't like it. We'll go back to what was said previously in chapter 5, is we can't create activity. It's done by material nature. So, which sounds like I'm helpless. But I do have choices. Why? Because I'm spirit soul and that material nature. If I identify with material nature, if I think I'm this body, that's a problem. Because then my choices get very quickly reduced. Supposing I don't think I'm this body, my choices expand. There's freedom in understanding who you are. There's confinement in not understanding who you are. And then you're confined by that misidentification, depending on what the misidentification is. Our real identity is we're spirit soul. And then there's the but. There's always a but. But sometimes there's some circumstances where we feel stuck and that we didn't have any choice. Sometimes we feel like that. Now, those of you that were not with us for the first 4 parts, part number 2 was ahimsa. Yes? And we saw this image, this ahimsa image. There's a fellow that's in his mind. And one of the discussions we had on this topic was, consider yourself like that bird sitting in a cage trying to get all of your needs met by others. You're in a cage. You're confined by the cage, and you have needs, and you're depending upon others to meet your needs. How does it feel? Feels disempowering. And in that situation, is there really a choice? Because that's our question. Is there a choice? Well, you don't have to be in a cage. When we discussed Gita value number 2, we discussed the importance of recognizing what your needs are and not relying on someone or material nature to fulfill your needs, but you take steps in the direction, you make choices in the direction of your needs. And then there's some reciprocation. If there's reciprocation from Supreme, who's in control of the material nature, your needs can be met. But the trap is the bodily conception. The bird in the cage is the bodily conception. That's the confinement. That's where it appears that you don't have choices. Why? Bodily conception. So it comes right back to the first Gita value, which is Samadarshana, which is resting upon what's at the bottom of the iceberg, which is, regardless of what the covering is, species or personality or nation or language or culture or color or anything, we're spirit souls. And if that once that understanding is awakened by a non-violent person who came along and helped you understand, excuse me, but you're not the body. That's good news. How do I understand that one? How do I live by that one? And so you get some training and education through a qualified acharya or teacher by example, and then you can start to understand and not feel disempowered, but recognize you have choices. In lower species, animals, they don't have that capacity. They're animals. There's a stimulus and there's a response. They get triggered by something and they respond or they react. They manifest their conditioning. But human beings have the capacity through detachment and knowledge, jnana vairagya, to know who you are. And over there, there's a circumstance, and over here, there's an emotion, and over there's some feelings and thoughts. And I can distance myself. I don't have to be ruled by all that. I don't have to feel confined by the circumstance or by someone else. So if that's the case, if that's a possibility, if there are choices, how come we can't always see our choices? That's a good question. Sometimes we can't. Well, Bhagavad Gita answers that question in chapter 2. Here we go. Looking at the top, by contemplating the object of the senses, whether I like something, I don't like, this is the binary thing. I like it, I don't like it. Here comes the senses, and the senses send information to the mind, and the senses say whatever the senses say, and then the mind says, I like it, or I don't like it. And then we develop some feelings connected to those objects. We develop an attachment or repulsion for the object. Supposing you like it, then you've got to get it. I like that object. I want one of those or something. So it develops lust. When lust is frustrated, then there's anger. When there's anger, there's delusion. When there's delusion, there's bewilderment. And intelligence is lost. And then one falls down into the material pool, the gross material existence. So notice on the left-hand side, we just, here, take it away. Here comes the mode of passion. You leave the position of goodness, this position of knowing who you are, and you enter into the realm of passion. You're contemplating something within the mind, and you develop an attachment for it. And then from the attachment, from ignorance, from passion comes ignorance. I want it, or I want to get rid of it. I want to change it, I want something. So then we act in a state of delusion when it doesn't happen the way that we want it to happen. It does happen that way sometimes. It doesn't always happen the way we want it. There's a big snowstorm coming this weekend. Christmas holiday, 50-mile-an-hour winds and snow flurries, and some people wanted a white Christmas, so they're going to get it. And some people aren't going to be able to go anywhere because it's going to be a big blizzard. Some like it, some don't like it. That's the mind. But it's still going to be a blizzard. So, mode of ignorance. Intelligence is our capacity to discriminate what our options are becomes lost by that sequence. So what the starting point is, contemplating objects of the senses in the mood of I want to enjoy, independently of Krishna. That's key. Wanting to enjoy is not a problem because it's our nature to be joyful. Wanting to enjoy independently of Krishna, that's the problem. And we have that independent of Krishna spirit, and there's an object out there, and something starts to happen. Woo, woo, woo. I want one of those. It's like a child. The kids have more sophisticated big children, like called adults, but it's the same. The principle is the same. I like, I don't like. It's the mind's function. And you contemplate within the mind, I like, I don't like. And the domino effect happens. One, boom, 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 boom. And intelligence is lost. Our capacity to discern what our choices are gets taken from us by Prakriti, the sequence of the modes of nature. So what's the option? The Bhagavad Gita gives the choice. To be able to see choices in all situations, we need to connect with our inner self. That's the soul, who we really are, not the mind, or the false ego, or the five gross elements, but who we really are. And then the Supreme, that's the higher consciousness. Okay, so now we're going to do an application exercise. See this carefully. I'll come back and show it to you again, but we're going to go into a breakout little session and ask you to pick a friend or two and discuss what we're going to show you just now. So it's not just theory, it's how do you live your life this way. Okay, here we go. Think of a situation where you presently feel or have felt stuck, or felt like you didn't have any choice. I'm going to pause so you can actually think about it. Sometime in the past or currently you're experiencing some situation that's just like, nothing I can do about this. I don't really have any choice. It's just thrust on me. And that's what it is. While contemplating that situation, in retrospect, what do you feel right now? That feeling trapped, or I don't have any choice, I'm stuck, I've considered, but nothing makes sense. What's the feeling? Like the other image, it feels disempowering. I'm stuck. Then pause and step out of that situation a little bit. So here's the sequence. We're going to ask you to go through this, and I'll show you the slides again, but we're going to ask you to actually do what we're just saying on the screen here, and then share it with another person. Okay, here's a stoplight, red, yellow, and green. So that the red is when you're feeling stuck. So what do you do when you're feeling stuck? You go into the mode of goodness space, which is the reflective space. Instead of just feeling stuck and staying stuck, feeling stuck, I'm helpless. You go into a pause space and calm yourself internally. Some people actually do this. Pranayama, take 8 deep breaths, or move to a more calm surrounding. You go to a reflective place. At least you can do it within your mind. And then separate yourself from your feelings. Remember, the animal can't do that, but a human can do that. What's going on inside is some feeling. But I'm not the feeling, I'm the observer of the feeling. That's a mode of goodness reflection. So you step into the mode of goodness. You can choose to do that. And when you step into the mode of goodness, you want to connect with who you really are. Connect with who you really are. Because I'm not the emotion, I'm not the thought or the feeling or the whatever it is that's going on in my subtle body. And I choose to connect with higher consciousness. It's one of the ways to do that, mantra meditation. Or you have some spiritual friends. If possible, you go spend some time. Help. I'm stuck. And I know that it's just my mind tricking me. So please give me your association. Please give me some wisdom. This friend is not meant to fix your problem. That's not what a real friend is. A friend is one who can help you step back from your situation and look at it through the lens of wisdom. And let's take a look at what your choices are. Not they make the choices for you and, take the steering wheel of your life. That's not what a good friend is going to do. They'll help you step back and help you see what your choices are. And then you go from that mode of goodness in reflection and make your higher consciousness connections, and then you start to make your choices. And ideally, what's going to help me continue on my path to higher consciousness? Or what's going to help me be in service to others in this circumstance? Well, I'll go over these 2 slides again because I'm going to ask you to discuss in your life, where is there such a situation? The wisdom of Bhagavad Gita is not only in Bhagavad Gita, it's universal wisdom. One of the places I like this saying, this is Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book after World War II. He was a Jewish man in a Nazi concentration camp, and he survived. And while he was there, he was composing his book in his mind because they didn't give him paper and pen. And the book was, because he was by profession, was a psychiatrist. So his intention was to help people who are in confining situations. There's nothing they can do about it. He couldn't do anything about being in the concentration camp. He couldn't change the situation, but he could do something about his consciousness and the choices he was making. So he made a choice. I want to, when I'm on the other side of this concentration camp program, I want to help people who are feeling confined by their circumstance. I want to write a book about it and help people for his profession. And he did. He became a celebrated person, Viktor Frankl. This is just a phrase from his book. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. That's this reflective space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now, this is a Jewish man. He's not a Bhagavad Gita advocate, but it's a principle of life that works. So the application exercise goes like this. Look at the situation you just identified and see what are some choices of action or intention that you see now that you may not have seen in the past or before we started having this discussion, there are choices, or at least intentions, like Viktor Frankl. I can't change the circumstance. I don't like the circumstance. I'm not meant to like the circumstance. It's not a likable circumstance. But when I get freedom from that circumstance, then I want to be able to help people with what I learned from that circumstance. And we're never going to have a Nazi concentration camp experience, hopefully. So our confining circumstances are less severe than his. So maybe you'll feel better knowing that. But when you're passing through and it seems very confining, is it that you don't have choices? You have choices. And freedom is recognizing that you have choices, and you may not be at the moment, you have some choice to do something, but you have choices. Then, after following the above steps, share with a nearby partner. So I'm going to go back to the slides. Here's the slides. Oh, it's a little bunch of steps. Think of a situation where, at present, you feel you are stuck, or in the past, you felt like you didn't have any choice. That's the circumstance, stuck. Then, when contemplating the situation, what's the feeling? Then how to step out of the situation. Or at least how to step out of the feelings, if you can't step out of the situation. It's cold air is coming in through the front door. It's the air conditioner. Just what we needed. Okay, I'm going to wait till you get climate control all set up. So we do have choices, right? Are you with me? Should I do it again? I don't need to do it again, right? You get the picture. Confining circumstances, the feelings that are there, feeling I really don't have a choice. What does it feel like? Step out of that feeling, and then when you're feeling stuck or distressed, these are the steps. We're going to ask you to take an example, practical life example for yourself, and discuss the pause step, where you move to a calm surroundings externally or internally, and you look at those feelings with a mood of detachment, because the feeling is not you, you're the observer of the feeling. That's that mode of goodness space, the pause space. And then after pausing and reflecting, instead of reacting like an animal, you connect with who you really are and connect with higher consciousness. Higher consciousness, you can say connect with Krishna or connect with reality with a capital R. The reality is not the temporary. Reality is eternal. So connect with that higher consciousness. Connect with persons who are good spiritual mentors for you, wise people who you look to when you need wisdom. You make that connection, that's the step towards transcendence, and then you start making choices. The choices, criterion for choices, is what's going to help me go forward on the path of higher consciousness, and how can I be of service to others? And that was Viktor Frankl's formula. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at this one and ask you, contemplate the stuck event and the stuck experience and how to move out of it based upon what you see on the screen. Is it clear? So look around you and who you'd like to share this kind of thing with. And when you're ready, you can start sharing. We'll take a few minutes. 5 to 7 minutes. Hare Krishna. What's the microphone for?
So asking them to explain how to split into group and part.
No, just somebody next to you. 2 people or 3 people. Anybody who knows how to do that. You know how to count to 2. Mataji, you got to interact. You got to participate. Don't be a bump. Participate.
How did you like build up this application? Now I need to pass. Yeah, pass could be depending on the then what choice did you take? Choice made how did you stay with the workplace, like minimum age choice, removing the limitation. And also, with the job. Yeah, that's my situation. I was also thinking that the job related to mental health and relating to that takes almost like 40%. Yeah, that's like 40% of what they not so as particular manager, but sometimes I feel especially the upcast they expect me to I don't know if they do it. I don't think they do it, but sometimes that I'm not happy on that information is I wanted or the expert on it. Suppose they done by mistake. But sometimes I tell them, oh, this I didn't know that. They didn't pass the information. So that's passing information that's where sometimes once or twice I actually told them because I need to copy it or but it still happens. It's not exactly completely shocking, but it's still like distance. Yeah, distance. I can say expecting, yeah, expecting to do the work, but not getting, not giving it less. And then, but whenever I, it happens in not weekly basis, maybe. And then immediately it's like, oh, this is nothing. So that time I think that about just communicate. Communication in communicating with yeah. So that's what I get. Dance or get that good feeling. Make that connection. Basically, reading about just think about big picture. And then go like that. Yeah, I think that's how I still trying to sometimes it's not the manager or give me others because that's their decision. But yeah, just one point. It could be another point about something else. When I, yeah, whenever I hear like philosophical, I feel like yeah, the big picture is
When we take guidance from to like somebody who you trust.
One more minute. Finish up.
One like really exemplary person. Did that.
Okay. Here we go. We're going to do a wrap up. Human life is meant for self-realization, self with a capital S, self-actualization. And when we're making choices, we have a choice at every step of life to choose self-realization or Krishna realization. And we have the choice to make wise choices. It may not happen by snapping your fingers that all of a sudden you have your self-realized person, but it's moving in that direction. And then what happens when you move in that direction or choose to move in that direction? Krishna's hand is there to help you. There's a nice verse in the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, this isn't Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, that says, there's no material cause for making the bhakti choice. There's no material impediment that can stop the bhakti choice. Here's the Sanskrit. Savang punksang paro dharmo yato bhaktir unto adhoksaja. And ahaituki means without material cause. And apratiyata means without material impediment. There's nothing material that can cause or stop bhakti. That's a choice. And yayatma suprasidati. So the paradharma, the supreme occupation or dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto adhoksaja, the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self. Atma suprasana. Atma suprasidati. When you get to that place of bhakti, then there's satisfaction within. When there's satisfaction within, the circumstance can be whatever it is, and you're okay. Not like, you can detect whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. Like when the blizzards come, it's going to be a blizzard. But there's nothing you can do about stopping the blizzard. But if you're content within, you're okay. You're okay. And last concluding point is the living entity's choice. We have choice, but our choices are not independent. I choose to jump over a tall building and I can't do it. So this is from Bhagavad Gita, same chapter 5, Prabhupada's purport. The living entity is anu, or atomic. Because he is a living soul, he has the capacity to desire by his free will. Such desire is fulfilled, however, only by the omnipotent Lord. So dependent independence. And so, when the living entity is bewildered in his desires, the Lord allows him to fulfill those desires. But the Lord is never responsible for the actions and reactions of the particular situation which may be desired. So we're dependent in our free will choices. We're dependent in our independence, minute independence. And that's, part of the picture of Bhagavad Gita. There's the living entity, there's Ishvara, and there's Prakriti, and there's karma. That's 4 of the 4 main topics of Bhagavad Gita. And the final one is quite mysterious, that's time. There's 5 topics in Bhagavad Gita. So there we are with Gita value number 5, Icha, or desire. So let's see if there's some discussion, some topics you'd like to cover while we're together here this evening. Because this is being recorded, there's a portable microphone we can pass around if you want to discuss something.
How was the program? Do you want to express something?
You're on the spot now. You don't have to.
I do not have a question.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Has this helped you get a picture of what the Bhagavad Gita is conveying to the reader? The principle is there's values by which one can live one's life. They're universal values. It's not just if you're from India, you can know this value, and if you're not from India, you're not going to know it. There's universal values, and it guides us through those values to have behaviors that are in alignment with the unchanging realities, this self-realization, self-actualization, to know who you are and to know who is the Supreme and your connection with the Supreme. And to live by these values will help you get to that place. That's the intention behind this whole exercise. And is it helpful?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. If there's no discussion, we can... There's online questions. Look at that. Give him the microphone.
What today the class is about is really like my situation today. So it helped me a lot.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you so
Good.
much.
Good. Even in a house where the air conditioning heat is on, we're getting cold air. You have something? No, go back to the online questions. You have something or no?
No, I would like to say thank you so much for the class today.
Thank you for hosting us.
We are so grateful for
We ran into a little bit of traffic getting here, but we made it.
thank you so much.
Okay. Online.
This is from Satyavrata Prabhu. When we put effort to overcome our anarthas, it takes long time. I see that I have no choice, but in due course of time, I feel that by Guru and Krishna's mercy, things are resolved. Why it takes long time in spite of having our strong desire to be properly situated?
Well, everything takes time because that's one of the 5 factors, 5 realities described in Bhagavad Gita. Now, how long it takes may have something to do with how covered we are. It also may have something to do with Krishna is examining us to see how much we're going to be independent in our thoughtfulness or dependent in our thoughtfulness. During this upcoming weekend, we're having a retreat. And if it isn't, the snowstorm isn't so terrible, you can come. And one of the topics that's going to be discussed Saturday morning is Lord Chaitanya testing his disciple Sanatana Goswami by placing an obstacle. And it doesn't get removed. 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 And Sanatana Goswami is in big. It's not. The obstacle was this. They met in Allahabad for 3 months. After 3 months, Lord Chaitanya sent him go to Vrindavan. After some time, you can come see me because I'm going to Puri. 1 year passed, he went to Puri. But in the course of his travels to Puri, he passed through the Jharkhand forest. Some of you may know where that place is. And as he was passing through the Jharkhand forest, he drank some water that resulted in his body getting a disease. The particular disease that his body came down with was he had sores on his body that were oozing pus and blood, like all over his body. Yucky, smelly stuff. And he was considering, Lord Chaitanya likes to embrace me. And if he embraces me, all this yucky, smelly stuff is going to smear over his body. So a number of things. So he was feeling really badly. And he was very conscientious. Here's a detail that we're going to hear about Saturday morning. One day, while living in Puri, Lord Chaitanya invited him to come have lunch with him. To go from where he was staying to where Lord Chaitanya was, the direct path, point A to point B, is you just go right past the Jagannath Puri temple, the Singhadwar gate, and go to where Lord Chaitanya was, at the Tota Gopinath temple. But he didn't go there. He went by the side of the sea, and at noon, in the summer, it's like fire. And his feet were blistered from the heat of the sand by the beach. Lord Chaitanya looked at his feet when he came and said, how'd this happen? What path did you follow to get here? He said, I went by the sea. He said, it's like fire. He said, I didn't feel any pain. I was looking forward to being with you. I didn't feel anything. He said, why didn't you come by the Singhadwar gate? See, it's because the priests come and go. Especially during midday, they come and go. And if my body rubs against them accidentally, then I'll make a big offense to the pujaris. So I didn't want to make an offense. He was very conscientious about his etiquette. Lord Chaitanya particularly, it's described in the commentaries, he was testing him. He wanted to see how cautious, how conscientious he was about the etiquette of not having his body touch the pujaris, because they'd be contaminated and he'd be offensive. So he inconvenienced himself, not only by time, but burning his feet to go by another path, by the sea. And then Lord Chaitanya said, Sanatana Goswami, there's nobody like you on this earth planet. You're so much conscientious about the proper etiquette of being respectful. So while knowing that about Sanatana Goswami, later it was said, because when Sanatana Goswami was visiting in Puri, he stayed with Haridas Thakur, who was Namacharya. Anyway, some details. Haridas said to Lord Chaitanya, you keep embracing him, but previously you have the power, You embraced a leper. Vasudeva Vipra, a learned Brahmin, had contracted leprosy. You embraced him and it cured his leprosy. Just like that, his body became golden in complexion. You keep embracing Sanatana Goswami and his body doesn't become transformed. You have the power to why aren't you transforming him? I don't understand your purpose. You're too mysterious. I don't understand. You have love for him. If you have such love for him, why would you put him in this circumstance? You could just change his body and he gets well. Then he doesn't have to have this thing, transgression of etiquette, of smearing this yucky stuff all over Lord Chaitanya's body, who was the object of love, not just a brahmana. Then there's some discussion. And the Lord Chaitanya was putting him in this difficult situation. So back to the question, why does it take a long time? In the case of Sanatana Goswami, it took a long time. It went on for months. And finally he cured him. He embraced him and the sores were gone. Boom. Miracle cure. That power was with Lord Chaitanya the whole time. But so Lord Chaitanya was examining his determination, leaving him, no, he can't turn left, can't turn right, he wanted to leave and go to Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya said, no, you stay here. And now I'm going to embrace you. So he's this big anxiety. Why is he putting his devotee in anxiety? Or the other way, why isn't giving him a swift deliverance? Then back to the question that was being asked. So it's not always we're too contaminated and fallen. It can be the other. Krishna wants to see how determined we are for the higher purpose of life by letting a difficulty continue to the point where we have no other shelter. No other shelter. That's happened with the Pandavas and so forth and so on. No other shelter. And Krishna came to the rescue. So to give them that feeling of, I have only one shelter. Sometimes that can be a reason why it takes a long time. There's another online question? That was it? Okay.
Namaskaram, Swamiji. I don't have a question on the Bhagavad Gita class which just happened. And I gathered that you are a direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada.
Yes, I am. By mercy.
Can you give some glimpses of what was it like to be in person with him? I read a few books, maybe one book.
What was it like? My thought, because of your question, my thought is going to the first time I saw him. I was a college kid. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything about anything. I was passing through the student union to go visit a friend. So I entered this side, went through to go out the other door because over there were the dormitories. It was where my friend lived. And as I was passing through the student union on the ground floor, there was a big crowd around an assembly hall. I crowded around the door. I hadn't seen anything quite like that, so I was curious what's going on inside. And I kind of wiggled my way inside through the door, crowded door. And there was Prabhupada on a stage. I'm trying to be responsive to your question, just like it's an impression. What was it like? So he was having kirtan when I entered, and he was on stage with Allen Ginsberg. Have you heard his name before? Allen Ginsberg was a kind of famous or infamous, depending, poet, American poet, Jewish man, Ginsberg. And he had long hair. It kind of looked like his hair scattered like Albert Einstein's hair sometimes looked like it was all over the place. A kind of receding hairline, similar. And he was an advocate of drugs, LSD experience. And he was a poet. And his poetry was the kind of stream of consciousness thing that you don't know where he was going, and he probably didn't either. And he was a celebrated guy, you know, counterculture celebrity, poet. And he liked India. He liked kirtan. So there was Allen. I recognized Allen Ginsberg. I didn't know who the other person was. And there was Allen Ginsberg playing on bongo drums, because that was what hippies did sometimes. They played on bongo drums. Boop, boop, boop. And Prabhupada was playing on kartals and, a sadhu profile. And the two of them on stage with spotlights. I didn't know what it was. They were just chanting Hare Krishna. And I was struck, like transported to another place just by the experience. The kirtan went on for quite a while. The people in the auditorium were intoxicated, bouncing off the ceiling and walls and high on something. And then they stopped. So I didn't speak long because of their condition. It was very simple. Described what the chanting is and what it does, and invited everyone to come to the center that's across the street from the campus. And then they served prasadam. I left because I went to see my friend, but it was that the first impression was, this is an out-of-the-world person. This isn't just a celebrity like Allen Ginsberg. This is an out-of-the-world person. And then in subsequent meetings, there was always something new, filled with surprises. Expect the unexpected, because that's what you're going to get. And always teaching, in every step, always teaching something. And elevating consciousness. That was his, being in his presence meant that. I'm thinking of one morning walk in a Brooklyn Botanical Garden. Nice place, big place. And it was a summer morning. It was kind of, a little on the chilly side, but, summer. And so walking along a path. And over there he saw a little pond, like a lake. So he just looked and pointed with his cane, and off we went towards the lake. And when we got to the lake, there were a bunch of ducks in the lake. And the ducks saw us coming, so the ducks started swimming over to where we were. And Prabhupada asked, does anybody have any prasadam? So somebody had some prasadam, and so he took the prasadam and threw it to the ducks. And smiled and turned and started walking. And then he stopped, put his cane down, and said, what lesson did we learn? And everyone's like, And Prabhupada's reply, his lesson was, the duck that quacks the loudest gets the bread. And didn't explain it. Then he made reference to that else in another situation, so then I could understand what he meant. But there's the eagerness for receiving, then you receive. You're one of the first to receive, because there's the eagerness to receive. So when you're eager to receive transcendence, that's a good qualification. But any circumstance was teaching a lesson. There's others that I'm thinking of as I'm speaking, but it just, he's a teacher, an acharya teaching by example, by prachar, but even more by achar. What the achar is always teaching. And the purpose behind his teaching was that people should not be in ignorance, they should be in knowledge, they should be happy. Not just, practical things too, but they should know reality. Because without knowing reality, it's like this ahimsa topic that we discussed very briefly at the beginning. When you know why people are suffering and you don't do anything about it, that's violence. When you know why people are suffering and you do something about it, that's nonviolence. That's the standard of nonviolence that Prabhupada lived by. And that's the kind of person he was. So it felt very safe. He's a person I want to follow, It wasn't like I had to process it. It was just very easy, natural.
I I have a question
Okay,
from
let's go.
from the other value, Gita value.
Okay.
That is ahimsa.
Okay.
Uh, in I don't know if it is already covered, but I've got this question. Like, if one of the Gita values ahimsa, and Krishna says fight the war.
Ah,
So
we discussed it.
yeah,
There's a little boy named Sri Harsha, and I asked him that question. He looked at me like, "Why are you asking me that question?" I don't know.
Or to put it other way around, what is the definition of ahimsa so that we'll understand better?
so
Okay.
he said non-violence.
Well, that's the
Again, you will enter into what is violence, then we'll understand better.
you're on it. You're on it. You got the answer.
Because in the entire realm of Hindu scripture or locus of Gita, because if not fighting is the motto, he would have said pack up and go back.
Yeah,
War would have been done.
it's over.
So if you take the larger gamut of Hindu dharma,
But okay.
every god, goddess is a weapon. So then there is something beyond our visualization that the difference between violence and ahimsa is something different by definition.
By definition. Let me respond, if I may. You got triggered with that one, huh? You want to say something before I speak? You got animated. It's okay. It's nice. It's nice. Okay, we'll give you the microphone later. The the worldly definition is don't hurt anybody. And there are different ways to hurt. One can hurt the body. One can hurt somebody's emotion. One can hurt somebody's mind by saying something insulting or hurtful or something like that. So there are different ways that people can suffer. So a nonviolent person tries to minimize the suffering of others. Let my existence be less an instrument of suffering for others. That's one definition of nonviolence. But we heard another one at the very beginning, and I can repeat it. The cause of suffering is ignorance. The root cause of suffering is ignorance. So nonviolence means to remove ignorance. The duty of a Kshatriya, in one case, Krishna was playing the role of a Kshatriya when appearing in this world. He had 3 reasons. It's a Bhagavad Gita. Now we're going to definitions like he is saying. 3 things. Pritranaya sadhunam, giving protection to the sadhus. Vinashaya cha duskritam, diminishing the influence of the duskritis, because they're causing disturbance for the sukritis, or the sadhus. And dharma sangstha, to restore dharma. Those 3 things. So Krishna came to destroy the demons. It was Krishna's plan. And the nonviolent plan is, let's walk away from the battle. Let them take the kingdom. Let them be miscreants. Let them do hurtful things. That's okay, because we're nonviolent. We're just going to do that one. However, they were creating big disturbance by violating the laws of the Supreme. They were unscrupulous, malicious, hurtful persons. One of the arguments that Yudhishthira gave to Krishna was, Duryodhana is doing a good job, he's a good manager, let him keep going. I don't need to be king, let him be king. It was a nonviolent message. Krishna wanted it. He may be a good manager, but what is his purpose in managing nicely? It's not divine. It's manipulative. And if somebody transgresses his manipulative persons, chop. And as he attempted murder and so many disgracing Draupadi and so many things, punishable crimes. He's to be punished. And let him, if I'm going to leave this world, and if he's still around and he's ruling the world, it's going to go down. I don't want that. Krishna didn't want that. Therefore, the non-violent thing, the ahimsa thing, was to take that thorn out. So the definition, back to your comment, the surface look is it was violence. That the definition of what non-violence is or ahimsa is when you remove the thorn or you may amputate a limb because it's gangrene or something, it's not violence. It's a good medical principle because the rest of the body will also be infected. You'll just leave it because we don't want to amputate. So it's a different definition or different perspective on what nonviolence is than the worldly kind. Doesn't trash the worldly kind. You still be kind to people. That's good. You don't want to bring suffering to other people. That's good. But when it comes to what's Krishna's intention, and he makes it really clear, explicitly clear to Arjuna, look, see in this universal form, they're already destroyed. If you're not the instrument, that's okay, that's your choice. But they're destroyed because they're miscreants. I came into this world to relieve, Mother Earth appealed to me, to relieve the earth of the burden of the demoniac kings. That's my plan. And you can be my instrument. And that's a non-violent, by definition, plan, is because that's what a Kshatriya does. Kshatriya, Trayate means to deliver, and Chat means hurt, so they have to protect people from being hurt. And Duryodhana and company were very hurtful people. So people had to be protected from that hurtful element. And if they could have been curtailed in other ways, fine. Krishna personally tried. No. I cannot be on the same planet with those 5 brothers. I will not give them 5 villages. I will not give them enough land that fits under the head of a pin. There must be fight. So trying to make peaceful settlements was unsuccessful. Krishna wanted there to be relieved because he was going to leave, and he wanted the earth to be ruled by a pious king. And that's nonviolence, having the world ruled by a pious king. Now, could it have been done in other ways? Sure. Disease, and they're all wiped out, and it's over. But he wanted it done this way, to teach an example. The real standard of nonviolence is to give protection to innocent people when it's called for, when it's required. And that's an act of nonviolence in the transcendental sense. And the same as giving knowledge, because why do people do ignorant things? Because they're ignorant. So dissemination of knowledge is an act of nonviolence, although some people look at it differently. Okay. I think we're finished for this evening. And tomorrow comes number 6. You have something? You have an announcement. Okay.